What do you remember about the end of the war?
What stands out to you?
Were you happy?
The first light on the horizon really was General Montgomery. Finally, he won at Tobruk and he drove out the Germans. And of course, things proceeded from there. The enemy went across to Sicily and Italy and of Italy, so it came to the end of the war.
When they did announce that it was D-Day, that the troops had landed in France, we still didn't know we were going to win. It was quite frightening, but every day you weren't allowed to speak at home if the news was on and your father was listening to the news. You had to be very quiet, and gradually things got better and better, and then we did dare to believe near the end that we would win.
Dad came back, picked me up again and took me through to just underneath the funnel of the ship. And we stood there for a bit. Somebody made a speech. Everybody clapped and cheered. And then I was lifted up above my father's shoulders and told to pull on that piece of rope. And as I pulled on the piece of rope, the klaxon sounded. And as soon as our ship stopped whooping, all the other ships in the harbour started up. And that was 11 o'clock on VE Day. And that was the beginning of peace.
Well, everybody went mad, of course. And with it being a village with a large village square, the square was absolutely full of people, you know, all going to see what was going on. And it was, you know, everybody was just very pleased that the war had finished.
We had a street party, yes. And, you know, it was a cul-de-sac, actually, so we had a table across and one that came down. And I suppose all the ladies managed to rustle up something with the rations. And, oh yes, we had a good party. And, you know, we all played games. Yes, it was lovely, but because it was a really big event in our lives, because it'd been 5 years of, you know, shortages and everything. And fear of the bombing, at least, you know.
When the war was over, some year later, I met my father, and for the first time, when he came back. And it was a wonderful experience because he brought loads of toys for my brother and myself and my sister. And I had a lovely time.
My dad was in the army. He was abroad. And the first memory I have, really, of my dad was looking. There was a side window that looked up the lane in Grandma's house. And I remember looking up the lane and seeing this soldier walking down with a kit bag and his rifle and saying, "Oh, my dad is here." And of course, Grandad was, no, your dad's in the war, you know, he's away. And it was my dad. It was a memory that, to me, meant everything, because Dad was home and he was going to stay home. Mum used to be on munitions at Francis, and then she was home. You know, it was, suddenly we had a family. Luckily enough, and thank goodness, all my uncles came home. We was lucky that way. Some people in Hill Lane didn't get their relative home. The next thing we knew was the Anderson shelter was coming down. And that, to me, was the end of the war then. Once that shelter was out of the garden, we knew there was no more bombs, no more war. It was the end.
So when the time came to come back, a big suitcase was built, and the rest of my stuff went to put in a tea chest, you know, books and things to come back. And my aunt was too ill to come to see me off, which I didn't realise at the time. So we set sail and we landed in Southampton on the 7th of December. Very cold, wet and grey and horrible. The following day we came up to Manchester to Victoria Station on the train, accompanied by a lady from the WVS. There were 3 boys and 2 girls. We got off on the station at Victoria Station and I just stood there because I didn't know who was who. And a lady in a red coat and hat came over and hugged me, and that was my mother, which I didn't recognise. My father had died while I was away, so she was on her own. I was the only child.
The end of the war was absolutely unforgettable. Everybody rushed out of their houses and all the ships on the Thames blew their hooters, and we just couldn't believe it. And we thought that the rationing was going to end, but nothing like that happened for a long time. We were still on our knobs of butter and our single jars of jam. And, you know, we occasionally got a banana and an orange, but it took a long time. But the people went potty. They had wonderful parties in London and the crowds were out dancing, and all the service people that were around filled the streets with music, and it was a very happy time. It was joy to everybody.
Remembrance to me, Remembrance Sunday. Yes, it's important, very important. It's to remember all those that didn't come home, but also those that came home but are damaged in some way. To me, it's remembering how I felt when Dad came home after thinking that he might have died when he was wounded. But even now, even today, there's so many young men being killed, being injured, one way or another. And it's important, it's very important to remember that where I am today and the good years I've had since the war is because of those men that lost their lives, that didn't come home. And I think it is so important to remember what they gave for us. And the world that we have now is because of them. And I hope that nobody ever forgets that. We mustn't forget that.